The great glass tower of Sterling Enterprises pierced the steel-gray sky, a monument to money and ambition. Inside, on the 17th floor, the air hummed not with excitement, but with the low, persistent drone of computers and quiet, judgmental whispers. At her desk, tucked away in a cubicle that felt smaller with each passing hour, sat Chloe. To anyone glancing over, she might have looked focused, her brown eyes fixed on the spreadsheet glowing on her monitor. But if one looked closer, they would see the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her coffee mug, and the way she deliberately avoided looking up, creating a fragile shield against the world outside her partition. The weight pressing down on Chloe had nothing to do with the stack of invoices waiting to be processed. It was a heavier, colder weight, the weight of other people's wrong ideas. It had started as a single sentence, overheard near the water cooler last week. "Did you hear about Chloe? With Mr. Sterling? The old one?" The sentence had multiplied, slithering through the office like a vine, twisting and growing with each retelling. Now the story was fully formed, a grotesque piece of fiction everyone accepted as truth. The story was that Chloe, the quiet girl from accounting, had been having a secret, inappropriate relationship with the former CEO, the elderly Mr. Harrington Sterling, to secure a promotion. The shame they painted her with was sticky and thick. They said she had lost her integrity, her self-respect, for a chance at a better desk. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was the reality. The truth was so far from their nasty story it was almost laughable, but Chloe hadn't laughed in days. Her interactions with Mr. Harrington Sterling had been exactly 3 in number. He was a kind, grandfatherly man who was preparing to retire and hand the company over to his nephew. He had asked Chloe, known for her sharp eye for detail, to help organize some confidential financial records for the transition. Their meetings were in his office, with the door open, and consisted entirely of spreadsheets and file boxes. The last time, he had even thanked her with a warm smile and a fatherly pat on the shoulder, saying, "You've been a great help to this old man, my dear. The new CEO will be lucky to have someone so diligent." That was it. That was the entire scandal. But someone had seen her leave his office late one evening, someone had seen the grateful pat on the shoulder, and a seed of malice had been planted. Now, when she walked to the break room, conversations would stutter to a halt. When she sat in the cafeteria, the chairs around her would remain empty. Her friend, Sarah from marketing, had even asked her, with a worried frown, if there was any truth to the rumors. The betrayal in that question, the doubt from someone she considered a friend, had hurt more than the whispers from strangers. The clock on her computer screen finally ticked over to 5 p.m. The usual frantic packing up began around her, but Chloe stayed perfectly still. She couldn't face the elevator ride down, packed shoulder to shoulder with people who thought the worst of her. She waited until the sounds of departure faded into a distant echo, until the floor was bathed in the quiet stillness that only follows a mass exodus. The office was empty, or so she thought. She packed her bag slowly, the zips sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. She just wanted to get home, to her small apartment where the only judgment came from her purring cat, Mittens. As she walked through the maze of dark cubicles towards the bank of elevators, she fumbled in her bag for her keys, her head down. She wasn't paying attention, her mind 1,000 miles away, replaying the hurtful comment she'd heard from the next cubicle that afternoon. And so, she turned a corner and walked directly into a solid, warm presence. A small, startled gasp escaped her lips as she stumbled back, her purse slipping from her shoulder and spilling its contents onto the polished floor. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, her voice shaky with surprise and embarrassment. She looked up and her breath caught in her throat. The man she had bumped into was not a late working colleague from her floor. He was young, probably in his early 30s, with dark, neatly styled hair and eyes the color of rich earth. He wore a suit that clearly cost more than her monthly rent, tailored to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He was, without a doubt, the most handsome man she had ever seen standing in an empty office hallway. He was already bending down, gracefully gathering the scattered items from her purse with long, capable fingers. "No, the fault is mine," he said, his voice a warm, calm baritone that seemed to soak up the silence of the empty office. "I wasn't watching where I was going." He handed her a lip balm, her wallet, and finally, a slightly crumpled packet of tissues, his fingers brushing against hers for a fleeting moment. A simple, accidental touch, but it sent a tiny, unexpected jolt up her arm. Chloe felt her cheeks grow hot. "Thank you," she murmured, hastily stuffing everything back into her bag. She just wanted to escape, to disappear into the elevator. But then he spoke again. "Working late?" he asked, his gaze steady and curiously intense. He wasn't just making polite conversation. He seemed to be genuinely looking at her, really seeing her. And in that moment, he must have seen the traces of the day's misery she had tried so hard to hide. The slight redness around her eyes that a cold splash of water couldn't fully erase. The tightness in her jaw from clenching it all afternoon. Chloe managed a weak nod. Just finishing up some things. She tried to smile, but it felt more like a wince. The man didn't look away. His expression softened with a hint of concern. "It's been a long day, I take it?" he stated gently, not really asking a question. "You seem to understand. I appreciate the dedication. It's employees like you who keep this place running." His words were so kind, so starkly different from the poison she'd been subjected to all day, that for a terrifying second, Chloe thought she might actually start to cry right there in front of this handsome stranger. Who was he? A visiting executive? He carried himself with an air of quiet authority that was impossible to ignore. "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely a whisper. She needed to get out of there. "Well, have a good evening." "You too," he said, stepping aside to let her pass. "Get home safe." Chloe practically fled to the elevator, jabbing the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, she caught one last glimpse of him standing in the hallway watching her, a thoughtful expression on his face. Leaning against the mirrored wall of the descending elevator, she let out a long, shaky breath. The encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes, but it had been the first human kindness she had experienced in a week. She didn't know his name. She didn't know he was Jasper Sterling, the nephew, the new CEO, the man who had just inherited the entire company. All she knew was that in a day filled with shadows, a stranger with kind eyes had offered a tiny, unexpected spark of light. And for the first time that evening, the walk home didn't feel quite so long. The morning after her chance encounter in the hallway, Chloe arrived at work feeling a strange mixture of her now familiar dread and a tiny, flickering spark of curiosity. The office seemed just as oppressive as she had left it, the air still thick with unspoken accusations. Sarah from marketing offered a hesitant, almost apologetic smile from across the room, which Chloe acknowledged with a tight nod before quickly burying herself in her cubicle. She booted up her computer, the screen flashing to life and illuminating the small, confined space that had become both her sanctuary and her prison. As her email inbox loaded, her heart gave a sudden, uncomfortable lurch. At the top of her unread messages, with a subject line that read simply "regarding last night," was an email from an address she didn't recognize. The sender's name, however, made her breath catch in her throat: Jasper Sterling. Her mind raced, scrambling to place the name. Sterling. Of course. The family that owned the company. The elderly man at the center of the rumors was Harrington Sterling. This Jasper must be a relative. With a trembling finger, she clicked open the message. The email was courteous and professional, but the tone was noticeably warmer than the standard corporate memos that usually flooded her inbox. It read, "Dear Chloe, it was a pleasure meeting you last evening, albeit briefly. I wanted to personally thank you again for your dedication. I understand you assisted my uncle Harrington with the transition files. I am now reviewing those documents and may require your insight. Please let me know if you have time for a brief virtual meeting today. Best, Jasper Sterling." Chloe read the message 3 times, her pulse thrumming in her ears. A meeting? With a Sterling? Panic and a thrill of something she couldn't name warred within her. The last thing she needed was more attention, especially from the very family that was the subject of the office gossip. What if someone saw her on a call with him? The rumors would spiral into something even more wild and unmanageable. But how could she refuse a direct request from what was clearly a senior member of the owning family? And a small, stubborn part of her, the part that had been bolstered by his kindness, wanted to talk to him again. She typed a careful, polite reply, agreeing to a meeting at 2 p.m. that afternoon, her fingers feeling clumsy and heavy on the keys. At precisely 2 o'clock, a calendar invitation appeared on her screen for a private video call. She put on her headset, her palms damp, and clicked the link. Jasper Sterling's face filled her screen. He was even more handsome in the clear light of day, his features sharp and defined. He was in what looked like a spacious, minimalist office, a wall of glass behind him showing a panoramic view of the city that her cubicle would never see. "Chloe, thank you for making the time," he began, his voice calm and steady through the headset. They started discussing the files, and Chloe was immediately impressed. He was sharp, asking insightful questions that showed he had done his homework. For 20 minutes, they spoke only of numbers and projections, and Chloe found herself relaxing, falling into the comfortable rhythm of her professional expertise. She was good at this, and it felt good to be recognized for it. Then, as the official business concluded, he leaned back in his chair slightly. My uncle was right, Jasper said, a small genuine smile touching his lips. You have an exceptional eye for detail. He spoke very highly of you. The mention of his uncle brought the weight of the office gossip crashing back down onto Chloe's shoulders. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, but he noticed. Of course he noticed. Is everything all right, Chloe? He asked, his tone shifting from professional to gently concerned. It was the gentle concern that undid her. The simple question, asked without malice, broke through the dam of her composure. Looking at his face on the screen, at those kind, perceptive eyes, she found she couldn't lie. The words tumbled out in a soft, rushed confession. It's the office, she said, her gaze dropping from the camera to her keyboard. There are rumors about me and your uncle. People think that our work meetings were something inappropriate, that I was using him. She couldn't believe she was saying this to Jasper Sterling, but the isolation of the past week had been unbearable, and he was the first person who had looked at her without judgment. There was a long silence on the other end of the call. When she dared to look back at the screen, his expression was not one of shock or disgust, but of dawning understanding and a flicker of anger that he quickly masked. I see, he said, his voice low and serious. I had heard some whispers, but I didn't realize they were so specific, or that they were directed at you. That is completely unacceptable. In that moment he wasn't just a Sterling, he was an ally. The relief that washed over Chloe was so profound it left her feeling weak. He believed her. Without question, without doubt, he believed her. That video call was the beginning of a secret friendship that unfolded in the digital shadows of the company's servers. They began to exchange emails that slowly stretched beyond work. A simple "thank you for the report" would be followed later in the day by, "I saw you reference the quarterly data from last spring. That was a smart connection to make." Then, a day later, an email from him would arrive with a subject line like, "Interesting article," linking to a piece about a book genre she had mentioned offhandedly in their call. The conversations grew longer, migrating from email to instant messages on the company's internal system. Their chat window became a private world, a tiny bubble of sanity in the chaotic ocean of the office. They discovered a shared love for old mystery novels and a mutual dislike for overly sweet coffee. He confessed he found the corporate world isolating at the top. She admitted she felt invisible at the bottom. They were two people on opposite ends of the corporate ladder, yet finding common ground in the simple act of conversation. One evening, after a particularly grueling day where Chloe had overheard two women in the bathroom speculating loudly about her, she was sitting at her kitchen table, pushing food around her plate. Her phone, a personal one she never used for work, buzzed with an unknown number. Hesitantly she answered. "Chloe? It's Jasper." His voice was a familiar comfort even through the phone. "I got your number from the HR file. I hope that's all right. You just seemed upset when you left today." He had noticed. He had been watching out for her. Tears welled in Chloe's eyes, but this time, they were not tears of sadness or shame. They were tears of gratitude. That phone call lasted for over an hour. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about the pressure of taking over the family business, the weight of everyone's expectations. She told him about growing up in a small town, about her dream of one day opening a little bookshop. The formality of their professional relationship melted away, replaced by an easy, deepening intimacy. Lying in her bed that night, phone pressed to her ear, Chloe realized with a jolt that the sound of his voice had become the highlight of her day. The rumors still swirled, the office was still cold, but she now had a secret warmth that no one could touch, a connection that felt exciting, dangerous, and utterly real. The whispers in the office had not subsided. If anything, they had taken on a new, persistent quality. Chloe's newfound secret friendship with Jasper, conducted through late-night phone calls and discreet messages, had become a fortress around her heart, but it did nothing to shield her from the daily reality of her co-workers' sidelong glances and the chilly silence that greeted her in the break room. The contrast between her private world, which was now filled with Jasper's warm voice and easy laughter, and her public existence, which was a study in isolation, created a strange dissonance within her. She moved through her days like an actress playing a part, performing her duties with mechanical efficiency while her mind replayed their conversations from the night before. She knew this couldn't last forever. The tension between the two worlds was a wire being stretched too tight, threatening to snap. The breaking point arrived not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a simple, company-wide email. The subject line was stark and formal. Mandatory all-hands meeting, 10 a.m., main conference room. A ripple of speculation went through the office. Was it about quarterly earnings? A new big client? Chloe felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach, a primal fear that somehow this involved her. She glanced at her computer screen at the private chat window she kept minimized. It remained silent. Jasper had said nothing to her. At 5 minutes to 10, the employees of Sterling Enterprises filed into the large, sunlit conference room. Chloe found a seat near the back, trying to make herself as small and inconspicuous as possible. She kept her eyes fixed on the polished surface of the table, tracing the wood grain with her gaze. The low murmur of the room suddenly hushed as the door at the front opened. The head of HR walked in, followed by Jasper. A fresh wave of whispers erupted, this time tinged with curiosity. Most of the staff had never seen the new CEO in person. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. He looked powerful and serious in a dark suit, his expression unreadable as he took his place at the podium. His eyes scanned the crowd, and for a fleeting second, they seemed to find hers, holding her gaze for a heartbeat before moving on. The HR manager made some brief, forgettable announcements about company policy. Then he yielded the floor to Jasper. The room fell utterly silent, every eye fixed on the young, handsome man who held their futures in his hands. He placed his hands on the sides of the podium and leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority that filled the space. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "I won't take up much of your time. There's an important matter I need to address directly. It has come to my attention that a malicious and completely false rumor has been spreading through this office." A pin could have been heard dropping in the room. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face, her hands turning to ice in her lap. This was it. "For the past several weeks," Jasper continued, his tone even but firm, "many of you have been operating under a deeply incorrect assumption about one of your colleagues. You've been led to believe that Chloe from the accounting department was involved in an inappropriate relationship with my uncle, Mr. Harrington Sterling." A collective, sharp intake of breath swept through the room. Chloe wanted to sink through the floor. She could feel hundreds of eyes swiveling to look at her, but she kept her own gaze locked on Jasper, on the strong, determined line of his jaw. "Let me be perfectly clear," Jasper said, his voice gaining a hard edge. "That story is a lie. It is a fiction born from gossip and a fundamental lack of respect. The truth is far less exciting, but it speaks to the kind of integrity we should value at this company. My uncle, in preparing for his retirement and my takeover, identified Chloe as an employee with exceptional diligence and discretion. He personally asked for her assistance in organizing sensitive transition documents. The meetings that were so grossly misinterpreted were professional, focused, and conducted with the door open. My uncle's only comment to me about Chloe was that she was a tremendous help and an asset to this company." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the stunned audience. "The man you mistakenly believed to be involved was simply a retiring gentleman relying on a trusted junior employee. And the man who is actually involved," he said, his gaze finding Chloe's once more and holding it with an intensity that made her breath catch, "is me. I am the new CEO. I have been working closely with Chloe for weeks, and I can personally attest to her professionalism, her character, and her invaluable contributions. The shameful behavior she has been subjected to ends now. Effective immediately, any further engagement in this kind of destructive gossip will be considered a serious violation of company conduct." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Jasper concluded, his voice softening just a fraction. "This company's greatest asset is its people. We should be building each other up, not tearing each other down based on lies. That's all. You may return to your work." The meeting ended not with a chatter of conversation, but with a stunned, shuffling quiet. People rose from their chairs, avoiding looking at Chloe, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and shock. Chloe remained seated, her legs feeling like water. She watched as Jasper stepped down from the podium and instead of leaving with the HR manager, he began to make his way through the crowd, directly toward her. He stopped in front of her desk. "Chloe," he said, his voice now quiet for her alone. "Are you okay?" She could only nod, her throat too tight for words. The world around her seemed to be moving in slow motion. He offered a small, reassuring smile. "Let's get some air." Without waiting for a reply, he gently took her elbow and guided her through the thinning crowd, out of the conference room and toward the bank of elevators. They rode down to the lobby in silence, the air between them electric with everything that had just happened. He led her out of the glass tower and across the street to the small, manicured park that stood in its shadow. The morning sun was warm on their faces, a stark contrast to the sterile office air. They walked along a gravel path until they found a quiet bench shaded by a large oak tree. The sounds of the city were a distant hum. Finally, Chloe found her voice. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to humiliate everyone like that." Jasper turned to face her, his expression earnest. "I didn't do it to humiliate them," he said softly. "I did it for you. I couldn't stand the thought of you coming to work every day in that atmosphere. I couldn't stand that they were hurting you with a lie." He reached out and tentatively took her hand in his. His touch was warm, solid, real. "The truth is, Chloe, these last few weeks talking to you, it's been the only thing that felt real since I took this job. I didn't just clear your name because it was the right thing to do. I did it because I care about you. More than I should, probably." Chloe looked down at their joined hands, then up into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the hope. The last of her defenses crumbled. The fortress around her heart didn't break, it simply opened its gates. "I care about you too," she whispered. In the dappled sunlight under the old oak tree, Jasper leaned in. He moved slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't. She met him halfway. Their first kiss was not a collision of passion, but a gentle, searching promise. It was soft and lingering, a silent communication of all the words they had shared over the phone and all the feelings that had been growing in the spaces between. When they finally parted, the world felt new. The rumors, the office, the shame, it all fell away, leaving only the two of them on a park bench with a future stretching out before them, bright and full of possibility. The world had shifted on its axis. In the days and weeks that followed Jasper's very public defense of her, the atmosphere in the office underwent a profound transformation. The whispers ceased entirely, replaced by a respectful, if somewhat awkward, silence that gradually warmed into cautious politeness. Co-workers who had once turned away now offered hesitant smiles and genuine offers to collaborate. The weight that had crushed Chloe's spirit for so long had been lifted, not gradually but in one swift, decisive moment. She could breathe again. She could walk to her desk with her head held high, the truth having set her free in the most literal sense. But the most significant change was not in the office. It was in the quiet, private world that now belonged exclusively to her and Jasper. Freed from the need for secrecy, their relationship unfolded like a flower finally reaching the sun. Their first official date was a simple affair, a world away from the five-star restaurants he could have chosen. He took her to a small, family-owned Italian restaurant tucked away on a cobblestone side street, a place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in old wine bottles. They talked for hours, not as CEO and employee, not as secret confidants but as Jasper and Chloe. He told her stories about growing up with the immense pressure of the sterling name, about his rebellious teenage years when he wanted to be anything but a businessman, about his love for sailing that he'd inherited from his grandfather. She told him about her small-town childhood, about her mother's battle with an illness that had shaped her resilience, about her dream of a quiet life filled with books and a garden. The conversation flowed as easily as it had over the phone, but now it was accompanied by the warmth of his hand covering hers on the tablecloth, by the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed at one of her jokes. This became the pattern of their new life together. They discovered a shared joy in the ordinary. They spent Saturday afternoons exploring used bookstores, their fingers brushing as they reached for the same worn volume. They went on long, aimless drives with the windows down, the wind whipping through their hair as they listened to music and pointed out interesting clouds. They cooked dinner together in her small, cozy apartment, a comical dance of two people in a tiny kitchen, laughing when he clumsily chopped vegetables or when she accidentally added too much salt to the sauce. These simple, unremarkable moments were, to both of them, more precious than any extravagant gesture. They were building a foundation, brick by brick, moment by moment, of a shared life. And as their emotional intimacy deepened, so too did their physical connection. It began with the simple electric touch of their hands, which now seemed to find each other instinctively whenever they walked side by side. It grew in the long, enveloping hugs they shared at her doorstep at the end of each date, hugs that spoke of comfort and a deep, growing need. The first time he kissed her goodnight, it was no longer under the urgent, emotional intensity of the park, but was instead slow and tender, a deliberate exploration that left them both breathless and longing for more. The natural progression of their closeness led, one rainy Friday evening, to their first night together. The decision was not spoken aloud but was communicated in the way he looked at her as the storm rattled her windows, in the way her hand lingered on his chest when he said he should probably go. The air in her apartment was thick with anticipation, the space between them charged with a warmth that had been building for weeks. When their lips met this time, it was with a new, profound sense of intention. The kiss was deeper, a prelude to a deeper intimacy. Leading him by the hand to her bedroom felt like the most natural step in the world. The room was lit only by the soft glow of a bedside lamp, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. There was a gentle, reverent quality to their movements, a silent understanding of the significance of the moment. This was not a frantic collision of bodies, but a slow, deliberate unveiling of souls. His hands were careful as they explored the landscape of her body, his touch a language of admiration and awe. Her responses were equally earnest, her own hands learning the feel of his skin, the solid strength of his back, the steady, rapid beat of his heart under her palm. Their intimacy was a conversation without words, a symphony of shared breaths, soft sighs, and the gentle rustle of sheets. It was a discovery of what made the other sigh with pleasure, a mapping of secret geographies. It was spicy not in a wild, frantic way, but in its profound tenderness, in the absolute focus they had on one another. The outside world, with all its complications and judgments, ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of their intertwined bodies, the safe harbor of her bed, and the unspoken promise that this was more than just a night, it was a beginning. When they finally lay still, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the rain patter against the window, a deep, contented silence settled over them. Falling asleep curled against his chest, her head resting in the hollow of his shoulder, Chloe felt a sense of peace and belonging so complete it was almost overwhelming. This was what it felt like to be truly known, and to be truly deeply loved. A year is a long time, and yet, in the grand tapestry of a life beginning to intertwine with another, it can feel like the blink of an eye. For Chloe and Jasper, the 12 months that followed their first night together were a period of quiet, sustained joy, a seamless blending of two separate worlds into one harmonious existence. The initial thrill of their public romance, the stares in the office that had quickly morphed from shock to acceptance, had long since faded into a comfortable normalcy. Chloe had eventually transitioned out of Sterling Enterprises, not out of necessity, but out of a desire to truly chase her own dream. With Jasper's unwavering encouragement and support, she had taken the leap and opened a small, charming bookshop in a leafy neighborhood, a place filled with the scent of old paper and fresh coffee, a world away from the sterile air of corporate accounting. It was her sanctuary, and seeing her thrive in it was a constant source of pride for Jasper. Their life together had settled into a rhythm that was both exciting and deeply comforting. They split their time between her cozy apartment, which still felt like home, and his more spacious penthouse, which he had slowly filled with traces of her, a stack of her favorite books on his nightstand, a fuzzy blanket she loved draped over his sofa, her favorite brand of tea in his kitchen cupboard. They had navigated the small challenges of merging lives. His tendency to work too late, her habit of leaving mugs half full around the house, not with conflict but with laughter and compromise. They had met each other's families. Chloe's mother had tearfully approved of the man who made her daughter's eyes shine, and Jasper's Uncle Harrington had welcomed Chloe with a warm, grandfatherly hug, expressing his delight that his favorite diligent employee had become the light of his nephew's life. Their love had been tested by the ordinary pressures of life and had only grown stronger, its roots sinking deeper with each passing season. On a perfect Saturday afternoon, when the sun was a golden orb in a sky of brilliant blue, Jasper suggested a picnic. It was a simple plan reminiscent of their early dates. He told her he would take care of everything, insisting she just be ready at 3. When he picked her up, there was a subtle, nervous energy about him that Chloe attributed to his desire for the day to be perfect. He drove them to the city park, the very same park where he had first kissed her under the old oak tree. But today he led her down a different path, one that wound its way to a more secluded clearing overlooking a small, tranquil pond. The spot was breathtakingly beautiful, and in the center of the clearing was a blanket laid out with an elaborate picnic basket, a bouquet of wildflowers, and a bottle of champagne chilling in a silver bucket. "Jasper, this is incredible," Chloe breathed, her heart swelling with love for this man who still went to such lengths to create magic for her. They ate and talked, the conversation easy and familiar. They laughed about a memory from their first disastrous cooking attempt and talked about plans for the bookshop's 1-year anniversary. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting perfectly on the still surface of the pond. The world was bathed in a warm, romantic glow. As they finished the last of the strawberries, Jasper grew quiet. He turned to her, his expression suddenly serious, filled with a depth of emotion that made Chloe's breath catch. "Chloe," he began, his voice soft but steady, "this past year with you has been the happiest of my life. Before you, my life was a checklist. Success, responsibility, expectations. I was living a life that was planned for me. But you taught me what it means to truly live. You showed me the joy in a quiet morning, the adventure in a used bookstore, the meaning of a love that isn't about what you can get, but what you can give. He paused, taking both of her hands in his. His eyes never left hers, holding her gaze with an intensity that spoke of absolute certainty. Loving you is the easiest, most natural thing I have ever done. It's as essential to me as breathing. You are my best friend, my confidant, my home. He then slowly, deliberately released her hands and lowered himself onto one knee. From his pocket he drew a small velvet box. As he opened it, the last rays of the setting sun caught the stone within, making it sparkle like a captured star. The ring was exquisite, a perfect diamond set on a delicate band, elegant and timeless. "Chloe," he said, his voice thick with emotion, yet clear and strong in the quiet evening air. "Will you make me the happiest man in the world? Will you marry me? Will you be my partner, my wife, my forever?" Time seemed to stop. Chloe looked from the beautiful, hopeful face of the man she loved more than anything, down to the ring that represented a future she had only ever dreamed of. Tears of pure, unadulterated joy welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. There was no hesitation, no doubt. In that moment, every path she had ever walked, every heartache she had ever endured, led her directly to this perfect, singular point in time. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Then louder, filled with all the love in her heart, "Yes, Jasper. 1,000 times yes." A brilliant, relieved smile broke across his face as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around in a circle as they both laughed and cried tears of happiness. Their kiss was a seal on their promise, a kiss filled with a lifetime of love and the thrilling anticipation of all the days that were yet to come. As they finally broke apart, holding each other close and watching the stars begin to pepper the twilight sky, they knew that this was not an ending, but the most beautiful beginning. Their story of whispers and truth, of secret friendships and public declarations, had led them here, to a promise of forever under the vast, hopeful sky. If you've been swept away by Chloe and Jasper's journey from painful rumors to a perfect promise, then you won't want to miss what comes next. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you full, complete stories just like this one, stories of love that conquers all. We have so many more tales to tell, of second chances, of unexpected encounters, of hearts finding their way home. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a single chapter of romance. Become part of our community of dreamers and let us tell you another story.